Hello, everyone. Today we are going to explore one of the most important skills we can develop. That is learning to be with and honoring our feelings. And we kind of have to begin with giving ourselves permission to feel what we feel.
That might seem like a radical concept, feeling what we feel, giving ourselves permission to feel what we feel. But many people struggle with this. So lean in with us today. And before we jump in, Isela, let's introduce ourselves and tell our audience why they should even listen to us at all. I'm Nina. I'm a trauma informed life coach. And I feel like my mission in this lifetime is to help people heal from childhood trauma so they can stop living in survival and step right into thriving. What about you, Isela?
I am Dr. Isela Garcia, and my overall journey in this life has been to be of service to others, to help people heal. And I have done that in working with young children. I've done that with working with families. And now I work with everyone in being able to understand their journey life and what we call our sacred journey. And I use my intuition. I work with angels and guides to be able to help us understand the truth of who we are. And so combined with the intuitive aspect of what we do, with Nina's very grounded approach to and learning to listen to the body, we actually help you understand the wholeness of who you truly are. So I want to talk about this because a few weeks ago, I kind of went into this weird sort of funk. And people experience the funk all the time, right? But for me, it really kind of brought me to this place of I was just feeling all kinds of things. I think, if I was trying to give meaning behind it or to label it in some sort, I guess that's what I was trying to do initially was like, what's going on with me? Like, why am I feeling like this? Like, what's happening in my life? Like, nothing's changed, right? Things are the same. So why am I feeling some type of way? Now, I will tell you that given what's happening in the world today, I am hyper empathic. And so I do feel like, the Mother Earth is going through her own transition. And I feel that. I feel the fear that people are experiencing right now. And so I recognize that because I'm highly sensitive, I pick up on those things. But that's not normal. Like that for a while now, I've been experiencing that. This was different. And I kind of didn't want to do anything. I wanted to just slump in my chair or lie down and do nothing. And I kind of felt sad and blah. And so years ago, when I was really working on living the life that I wanted to experience, I would quickly shift out of that funk by doing the things. So that might be, doing some deep breathing. It might be doing some emotional freedom techniques. So if you're familiar with tapping, it's like, it's this idea of change my thought and then my feelings will change and my experience will change. And so what would happen is I would feel some type of way and I'd do something quickly to shift out of it. What I didn't realize I was doing because I was, you get good at that. You're like, "Oh, feeling something uncomfortable. I don't like that. Let me do something to shift out of it." And then it creeps up again and you're in that same cycle. And what I have learned is that first off, I didn't have to like figure out what I was experiencing. I learned that I can just give myself permission to feel whatever I was feeling. And I learned to just kind of notice and be with myself. And I think that's something that has taken time,
Mhm.
and it didn't scare me. That's the thing that sometimes when we're like, if I let myself feel whatever is happening, I'll never get out of it. I'll stay there. That's scary. Like, why would I want to feel what I'm feeling? I need to shift out of it very quickly. And I think that's something that a lot of us who've been doing this work for a while, we do that.
And I notice a lot of days like this in perimenopause for myself personally. I'll wake up and I'll just wake up, and the day before I felt, what I would call like normal, average day. I'll wake up and I'll feel like I was hit by a meth truck. And and then here's what we do. Raise your hand if you've ever like shoulded on yourself. Like like you did, Isela. I shouldn't feel this way. Everything's the same as it was yesterday. All is well. Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel, moody, irritable, sad, whatever those feelings are? Why do I feel that way? And then we shit on ourselves and try to get out of it as quickly as possible.
That hormone thing, I forgot to mention that part. It's a really important part in it. You are someone who's experienced these hormone fluctuations for whatever reason. It may not be that you're in perimenopause. It may be that you have PMS, like, but hormones impact us big time. And so, yeah, I think that we do have those ups and downs and these experiences that can happen in a 24-hour period, right? We're high, we're
Mhm.
low, we're all over the place. And we're trained. Oh, so many of us are trained to quiet that part of ourselves that's showing up because that's not how we're supposed to show up.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to be irritated. We're not supposed to experience anxiousness. And if we're experiencing it, we hide it. We hide it and nobody knows, right?
We look so good on the outside, but underneath, it reminds me of that duck who's paddling in the water underneath the water, and you see the outside, and the duck just looks so stoic. And we're often pushing down our feelings, pushing them away. So let's get into talking about what are feelings and why do we have them? And why should we even consider feeling them or giving ourselves permission to feel them?
So, this is one of those questions that there are lots of different perspectives around feelings versus emotions. And it really depends on who you talk to and what. So, this is my experience of feelings versus emotion. So, emotions are something that we experience like boom, they happen. I see something, there's a memory, there's an experience that I'm having, and our body reacts to that. And our body goes, "Oh, you're not safe." Or there is a memory of a situation that you had maybe when you were 3 years old, and there's something that is happening in front of you that now evokes, it's like wakes up that part within us, wakes up that, and then it's like, oh my goodness, this is not a safe experience. And we become dysregulated. Our stress response system kind of gets activated, and we sometimes go into fight, we go into flight, we go into freeze. We respond in a way, or we react in a way to just keep ourselves safe. Right. And our goal is then, at least my goal for myself, is to get myself back into a more regulated state. Because the moment I become dysregulated completely, I go offline. My brain goes offline. My access to my prefrontal cortex of the brain, it goes offline. So I can go, oh, let me make a rational decision in this situation. Oh, I remember when this happened before. So now I know what to do now. Like I'm just in survival. That it to me is different than feelings. Feelings are something like I think about something and I'm evoking a feeling within me that might feel uncomfortable or where I feel sad or I feel so there's a connection. And this feeling piece could be a residual from a reactant, dysregulated state. And so feelings are things that I think we feel a lot and all of the time. And we're just in this constant state of feeling, right? Whether we're aware of it or whether we're connected to it is completely a different story. But I think that our emotions are things that happen automatically versus our feelings that we have some level of control over. And so we want to be able to regulate our emotional state, right? So then we can access our feeling state and we can access whatever is happening because it's a residual. Like if you're feeling anxiousness, for a lot of us, that's the undercurrent that's just going on in our life. And we try to manage and work through whatever it is we're doing in our day to day experiences. And there's a residual feeling that might be negatively impacting those quality of experiences that we have. So that for me is how I make sense of it because one I have immediate control over, and the other I have to learn to like have some I would say employ some approaches to help myself get to a place where I can actually make some changes.
To make it really simple for everyone, I want to invite some flexibility with naming and identifying, is this an emotion? Is this a feeling? Is it, and the flexibility in, I don't really have to know exactly the name or the way I identify this feeling. What you want to think about when it comes to feelings and remember is there's sensation, vibration in the body. And I always like to say emotion is energy in motion. You can think of feelings the same way. It's energy in the body, and you can identify it like tightness in the chest, tingliness in my arm, a tightness or lump in my throat. Butterflies, we often think of like butterflies in our stomach as maybe it's nervousness. We can name it that, for example, or you can just say, I have butterflies in my stomach right now.
Mhm.
It feels like I have butterflies in my stomach.
Yeah, I think our connection to our physical body, it's critically important, I think, when we're really starting to understand our emotional state, because what's showing up for us in the body, and we can talk about why we're so disconnected from our emotional bodies. But when we are connected to that sensation in our chest, right? Our body. So now I recognize that my chest is feeling tight. I recognize that my jaw is feeling tight. And if you're watching this, just check in with yourself now. Like notice, just relax your jaw, like just soften it. Was your jaw tight? It's like when we put our awareness into different parts of our bodies, right? It starts to communicate with us. And whatever's showing up in the body is just there as a way to communicate what it is that we're experiencing. But, if we're disconnected, we're not aware.
I now understand the body is a divine intelligence. It has its own divine intelligence and it speaks, and it speaks through feelings and emotions. And when we're not paying attention and I lived a lot of my life, almost the majority of my life, disconnected from my body. And many people, Isel, you mentioned it, get disconnected from their body it, because of many things, trauma being one of them. And I used to define myself as like, I'm just a head walking around, kind of like a balloon walking around with a string on it. I was totally cut off from the body. I had very little access to understanding what I was feeling and very little capacity to be with it. Meaning, could I be with the feeling for, a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes? Could I be with that feeling that you said, I just allowed myself to be with it? I had little capacity. And the good news is that you can create capacity over time, over experience to be with your feelings. It doesn't all just happen at one time, usually, if you are disconnected from your body, but you can create capacity to be with your emotions, and using regulation tools can help you at the beginning for sure. Regulation tools such as breath, sound, movement, tapping, like Isela said, can be really helpful, like entryways into like, how can I create a safer place in my body so I could feel what's really happening right now? And so I can listen. Oh, my body is speaking to me. For example, you're working or this relationship you're in isn't really aligned. And every time you're in that relationship or every time you're in this place you're working, you get this tightness in your chest, but you don't understand why. Like the body is speaking to you. And if you can create capacity to, I call it, go within that emotion and listen, right? Listen, what are you telling me? Then you're going to have this connection between your intellectual self and your emotional self. Over time, that can be built.
I think it's important to note that the tools, the regulation tools that you mentioned, I think far too often we think about them when we are not really in a good place. So, like, Okay, what can I do? What can I quickly do to kind of make my, like I feel some type of way? I think that the practice of these tools is what helps us build capacity. That's like our ability to access these tools during, all of the times that we're feeling some experiences that might feel uncomfortable, right? For us. It's important to know you have to practice it when you're in a regulated state. Like, you have to
Mhm.
practice it when you're feeling kinda good because you can't access it or it's hard, not impossible, but hard to access it when you are in a disarray and you've never practiced it before, right? It's like
Mhm.
people say, learn to deep breathe. Oh yeah, I will. Oh yeah, that sounds like a good thing. And then we're like, when we're trying to, like, if you have somebody to help you through the process of accessing it, co-regulating with you, helping you to remember to take a deep breath, and that's amazing. But if you don't, you can't really practice something or bring it in if you haven't actually done it over and over and over and over again, because then it's an unfamiliar experience to you. And so, yeah, I always think about it like the way that I used to do this when I was first learning this. It's like I would get into my car and I would start to take a couple deep breaths before I started my car. And, it's like with my daughter, when she was young, we would take a couple deep breaths before we walked outside, like to get into the car. So I would integrate these tools, these approaches to help me become more familiar with them. So then it became kind of second nature. And then that's what helped me when I was feeling, big emotion, big experiences, things that felt uncomfortable to me, that it helped me be able to know and feel safe that I could regulate myself if I needed to.
I consider the gateway from the mind to the body breath because it can even taking 1 or 2 deep breaths on the way outside gives you that momentary connection to the body.
Mhm.
Right? Just like, I just connected to my body just now. And when you are in that stressful state, your brain is going to be like, oh, I know what to do. I know what to do in this case because you've used that practice many times. So your brain just goes directly to breath or, tapping or something like that. But I think, talking about the effect of not being with your feeling, giving yourself permission to feel is huge here because when the brain doesn't know what to do when you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, or sad or anxious, there's something that you do that's not giving yourself permission. And those are often coping mechanisms.
So, what
So
would you say the coping mechanisms are for people?
food, so I eat when I'm feeling stressed. Opposite, maybe you have a food aversion, you forget to eat so you don't nourish your body, or you overwork. You might snap at your family members. Maybe so if this is your vessel, say this is your body, right? And at 8 a.m., you have a little bit of stress because you're running late for work and you do nothing about it with the body. And then you get to work and then your coworker says something that's pretty irritating. You have another meeting. And all the while, you're not doing anything to support your body through these feelings that are coming up in your body. You have another meeting and it's running late, and then you're late to your other meeting. So more stress is pile on, you're feeling overwhelmed. And then at the end of the day, you get home and, this lid pops off and you might like, take it out on one of your children. That's real life situation right there. So all the while you're saying in your head, I don't have time for that. I ain't got time for a feeling. I got to keep going. So you might, there's other coping mechanisms, like I might scroll on social media, I might drink, I might do drugs, there's all kinds of, I might seek external validation. Maybe that'll help me feel better. We're in our patterns, whatever that coping mechanism for you is. And I am no stranger to coping mechanism. When you're disconnected from your body, you have quite a bit of them.
I think in part our disconnection is what kept us safe because as children, the unfortunate truth is that many of us were not given permission to feel. And so, in my experience, I used to hear messages like, you want a reason to cry? I'll give you a reason to cry. I think a lot of us Gen Xers heard that. My mom used to say, you better stop acting stupid. and
Mhm.
stupid meant feeling or expressing any kind of emotion that was unpleasant to her, something that she did not want to be bothered with. And so I learned to hide it, swallow it back, and then ultimately completely disconnect from it because that was the way that I stayed safe. So I think it's important for us to just be curious about why these patterns that we have where they may have developed. We don't have to delve deeply into it, but for me, it helps me understand that it was simply my way of staying safe. And so as an adult, there is still the perception because that little girl is still inside of me that's like, oh no, don't feel what you're feeling because that's scary and that's bad. And people aren't going to be okay with that. And that's going to make people uncomfortable. And all of the story that I developed and that became my belief when I was little, given my circumstances, still exists within me as an adult. And so when I'm engaging in situations with people and out in the world and all the things that we do in our day to day experiences, becoming aware that that was simply a pattern that helped keep me safe, but I don't need that anymore. I don't need to not experience my emotions anymore because the adult part of myself, the part that knows, the part that has developed all of these tools, can access them and help me be able to move through it. And that the little girl within me, the part within me that's scared about that, that I have now the ability to comfort her and to tell her we are we are safe.
Mhm. A couple things came to mind as you were sharing that. I had much of the same experience with emotions. It was almost this message of go away until you're happy. So go to your room with that and then come back when you're happy. So that way I can feel comfortable, speaking about my caregivers, right? I'll feel comfortable if you go away with that. And so I often have this conditioning of I'm too much. Have you ever thought about like, I'm just too much. I shouldn't be so emotional. I've even had clients say, I'm just not a crier. I just don't cry. And I also have other people that I've witnessed say it's weak to cry. So in front of people. So I don't cry in front of people. I only cry by myself because if I'm in front of people, it's weak. So what happens in the body, somatically speaking, if you're in front of someone, say Isela and I are with each other right now, and I want to cry. Let's say I something comes up and I feel this feeling that crying would be a great way to release these emotions. And I have this conditioning around crying. I will unconsciously, the mind and body will like tamper the crying down, that energy. Remember the energy. Tamper it down and it's going to get stuck somewhere. Usually it's in the throat, so back this way, and then you might feel some burning, maybe even a lump in your throat. And no matter what you do, you can't get yourself to cry because you're in front of the person and you're so conditioned that it's not safe. So your body like just holds on to that energy.
Mhm.
This leads me to like a consequence of not giving yourself permission to fully express. So if feelings are energy and motion, there's a completion cycle that needs to get done. So when you push it down, where does it go? This is what people, and I never knew, but it stays in the body.
Mhm.
So this might be a bold statement, maybe a little radical, but like dis-ease, depression is a suppression of feelings and emotion. Because we didn't finish the cycle of feeling. So it stays in the body. So you might have something going on here. Maybe you have pain in your upper back and neck, and you're wondering, like, why does this happen? Because that's where you're storing energy. And so if you're a chronic pain, I would call you a chronic pain survivor, you live with chronic pain, you want to look at when's the last time you allowed yourself to feel feeling. You gave yourself permission to feel like right now, I feel XYZ. Right now, I feel sad. Right now, I feel anxious and it feels like tightness in my belly and it feels like shallow breathing. When's the last time you allowed yourself to be with your body And I don't want to speak for you, but in many cases, the person doesn't know. They never have. They were not allowed to. And that's what I feel like so passionate about because I feel like we are misinformed, like when you go to a doctor's office, and now I'm going on a tangent right now because I get real passionate about this. When you go to the doctor's office, when you go to therapy, it's almost never talked about your emotions. Are you feeling your feelings? How to get through an emotion that feels really strong. I went all throughout 30s and 20s and into my 40s and never learned about nervous system regulation. And I was in therapy, never learned about the power of our breath. Our creator gave us this powerful tool and nobody ever taught us. So I'm hoping that this is really landing and resonating with you, the impact of not feeling your feelings. But I want you to also know that there's an unconscious part of you that's shutting them down. But you can reteach yourself. Like Isela said, you can reteach yourself and you can create safety for yourself to be with your feelings over time.
So recently, I heard of a research that was done around resilience. And resilience has always been, because of the field of work I did for a very long time, resilience was our primary goal. How do we help people become more resilient? And the initial definition of resilience was the ability to bounce back after life's circumstances. But we realized that there was a shortcoming of that. That not a great definition because we bounce back, but we don't always thrive. We still stay in survival. So resilience is really the ability to bounce back and thrive. And in this research that was conducted, and I wish I could remember where it came from, but what they recognized, what they contemplated was why is it that some people are more resilient than others? And what the research found was that the people who tended to be more resilient, even in families, like, family units, and why are more people like, why is this sibling more resilient than the other one, right? The research shows that it's that they tell that they had the ability, that whether it was through therapy or someone guided them or that they just kind of figured this out, that they were able to tell the story, that they found the language to tell the story of their experience. And the ability to tell the story might include, I think for most of us, is how it felt to experience.
Mhm.
So whatever it is, what traumas you experienced, and maybe it wasn't a big trauma in your life, but it was something that over time, which those of us who experience complex trauma, right? Over time, there were these little things, but being able to articulate all of these little things, to identify what was I experiencing? Was it fear that I lived with? What was it that happened? Right? That the people who are able to find the language to tell their story, to articulate, identify what it is that they experienced at, whatever age, that the people who are able to do that successfully. And it's not even from like a therapeutic model where you're like trying to figure out the what's and the whys in the house. Like literally just tell the story, write it down, and close the book. That's it. That the people who are able to do that had a much higher, like, resilience in life.
That is fascinating. Wow. That reminds me of removing the labels of feelings and emotions. So we're conditioned to think that, say, a bad feeling is anxious, overwhelmed. A good feeling is joy, happy, excitement. So if we remove good and bad,
Right.
we can create resilience to feel all the emotions. I think Brene Brown was the first person I ever heard talk about if you suppress bad emotions, you suppress good emotions. I'm using air quotes around bad and good. But that helped me because I discovered that I would suppress what I thought were bad emotions. And because I did that, I had very little capacity to feel any comfortable, what I call comfortable or good emotions now. Right. So I struggle and I'm still creating the capacity now to feel joy. Right. So let's say I'm trying to build resist or resilience even around a joyful experience. If I'm able to write it down and say, I felt joy, here's what happened, this is what happened, that felt really good. And you're saying that just close the book. That showed more resilience in the person.
And I think I want to kind of break down what you just said because I think it's really important for those who are with us here today. So basically, when you don't allow yourself to feel all of the things that you consider negative emotions, right? I'm not supposed to be angry. I'm not supposed to feel selfish. I'm not supposed to feel like all of the things that we have been given messages that, especially as women, because many of us have been given messages about what a nice woman does, what a nice proper woman does. They don't show up this particular way. You better not, be mean or rude or all of those things, right? So we have this kind of playing in the background all of the time. And so when we suppress those feelings that we have deemed not good, then you don't get to feel stuff like joy and happiness and those experiences that we think are amazingly positive. Because when you suppress one part of your emotional state, you're suppressing it all. So you don't get to fully explore what it feels like to feel happy.
And that's what we're here for, to feel the full array of emotions, the ebbs and the flows, all of them. That's what the human experience is. We're on this planet, we're on this earth to like experience it all. You know what? That reminds me of when I first moved to Oklahoma, I joined a women's circle. And I had a lot of conditioning around how women were supposed to act. We used to check in at the beginning and we used to check in with what was alive in our body. What were we feeling? And at the time, this was several years ago, I was pretty disconnected from my body. But one of the young women in like her mid 20s said, I'm feeling really bratty today. And in that moment, when she shared that she was feeling bratty, it opened up something in me. It was like, oh, we are actually supposed to feel and own all the things and not judge it. This is what's alive for me right now. So, my invitation to everyone watching this is, could you give yourself permission to be so honest? You don't have to tell everybody how you're feeling, but could you be so honest to say, I'm feeling bratty today? I'm feeling, like you said, I'm feeling selfish today. Could you give yourself permission to own it and to honor it? That's how I'm feeling right now.
You had said something about the meaning that we give our feelings, right? And I think that's especially true. So the word selfish, the what happens with selfishness, right? How many times have we heard like the sacrifices we're supposed to make as moms or as somebody in a relationship, like that's your job is to sacrifice parts of yourself in order to ensure that everybody is happy, right? I mean, whether we consciously think about it or not, that's the message that many of us have received in some way. And the idea of selfishness for me, I actually wasn't afraid to say that I'm selfish. And, I didn't have a child. My husband and I were together for 18 years before we actually decided to have a baby, to bring a child into this world. And one of the things that happens when you get married is people are like, when you're going to have a child, when you're going to have a child, like when is the baby coming? When is that's just constant, constant, constant. And my response is, I'm selfish. I don't want to give up my life. I don't want to give up my career path. I don't want to give up my educational pursuits. I don't want to give up my time. So I'm selfish and I am not ashamed of feeling that way. So our perceptions of words like selfish or anxiousness or sadness, our perception is what makes it, I think, challenging because we've given meaning to these experiences. And all it is something showing up for us. That's all it is, something showing up for us. And we get to explore it. We get to be curious about it. We get to wonder about it. And we get to decide, do I want to be with this experience just a little bit longer for me to have a deeper understanding of myself? Or do I just notice it and kind of move on with my experience of life? Not everything, we don't have to sit with
Yeah.
everything that's showing up for us, right? Because then we're never going to do anything in life.
Yeah.
That's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is that sometimes these experiences bring a deeper understanding of ourselves. And what we're inviting you to do is just be okay with paying attention to what's showing up and being curious about it and allowing yourself some time to kind of be with whatever it is you're experiencing.
And if we haven't sold you on feeling feelings yet, I want to give you an example. I was married for 13 years. And before I got married, there was a big part of me that knew that I should not, but I was very disconnected from my body. So this is another consequence of not listening. So I had lots of emotion that would come up that were signals. They're like signals, 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 signals over and over and over again. And I would ignore them. I would ignore myself. And when we ignore our emotions, we will stay in relationships. I don't know if you've ever known someone who's in an abusive relationship, physical, emotional, any kind of abusive relationship. But sometimes what we'll do is we'll lie to ourselves. But the body doesn't lie. So we'll lie to ourselves and we'll try to change our thoughts, especially in the spiritual community. We're part of the spiritual community, but there are parts of the spiritual community that think, I just think I should think a better thinking thought, a better feeling thought, right? Let me just change my thought. All is well. He's going to change whatever thought we want to think, but we're avoiding the feeling. But if we allowed ourselves to sit with rage, feel and express rage, or feel and express anger, or discomfort, or disappointment, or dissatisfaction, our feelings actually, if you look at cognitive behavioral therapy, the thought creates a feeling, feeling drives an action. Now, Isela and I both know that there's a chicken before the egg thing with the thought and feeling. Sometimes this thought creates feeling, sometimes this feeling creates thought. But one thing that doesn't change is your feeling drives an action or an inaction. So if you actually feel the feeling, that feeling could drive you to an action that is in alignment with what your soul is calling you forward to do. But we often will suppress it. And so I stayed in that marriage. I got married, and then I stayed in the marriage for so long until my body was so loud I couldn't ignore it. And it felt like I felt like, it was yelling at me, like it was time. But it felt I had this pattern of it had to get really bad. It's like this enduring pattern, right? I could suffer, quote unquote suffer. There was a lot about my marriage that wasn't suffering. So I don't want to, sound like a victim. No, no, no. I stayed in there because I convinced myself that with my mind and not my body, that I should stay there. So I really wanted to share that. And I want to share another example real quick. We often will look at uncomfortable emotions. If you're going to remove a label, you can use uncomfortable and comfortable if you want to take that on. We often look at uncomfortable emotions as like, I don't want to feel these, so I'll just feel the joyful ones. I want to give you an example of how feeling guilt could be helpful. And I never thought of this, but this happened this year. I talked on the phone with my daughter, FaceTime, and I had told myself, like, I'm going to be present with her. And then I told myself a story about being able to do things while I'm talking with her and I could still be present. With ADHD and neurodivergence, sometimes doing things is helpful to be present. So that was a story I told myself. But after I got off the phone call, I felt guilt because I wasn't actually being present with her. And I wanted to avoid feeling guilt. But then I thought, no, 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 let's feel the guilt. Let's sit with the guilt. Let me give myself permission to sit with it. So I sat with it and I felt guilt in my stomach. and I listened to what it said. And the guilt was a message for me that yes, you could be doing something else, but you have to be like your ultimate desire is to be present with her. So you're not going to be like driving to go pick up your restaurant order because that's literally what I did. You could be doing something else, maybe fidgeting or cleaning in the house or something. Drove me to my ultimate truth, which was the way I did it didn't feel right. But if I had avoided the guilt, I wouldn't have got that powerful knowing inside. That was the only knowing I could get by actually listening to the guilt.
First off, I think that's a really powerful experience. And I want to go back to what you initially were talking about in the relationship, because I think a lot of people stay stuck in situations like a bad job, not just relationship, but a bad job, relationships in general. It could be friendships, right? And I think we stay stuck. I use the collective we when I'm talking about this sort of thing, but like we stay stuck in situations. And what happens is that when we start to feel something, we quickly, and this is happening at a very quick, unconsciously, what happens is we go into the, but what if? Okay. So, but if I leave this job, how am I going to make money? I'm never going to find another place to work where I'm going to have like the flexibility I have, or maybe the hours that I have, or maybe the benefits that I have, right? If I leave this relationship, what will happen with the children? What will happen with bills? And we start to go into convincing ourselves that that feeling that's coming up for us is is not worth listening to, that there's too much at stake, even though our bodies are saying, "Hello, this is uncomfortable. This doesn't feel good. This is not what you're meant to do. This is not what's in your best interest." And so now when we move into your experience with your daughter and learning to kind of be with, and what I say is hello. I say hello to whatever shows up for me. It sounds goofy, but it works for me. I say hello, frustration. When I know that in my body, because this takes a little bit of time, when you go, okay, my stomach tightens and my throat feels tight as well. That for me is what frustration feels like. Okay. You don't always need a label, but when you know in your body, oh, that frustration is showing up for me, I will say, hi, frustration. I feel you. I feel you. You're showing up for me right now. And that's exactly what I do. I tap and I just recognize it. And so for me, for you in your story of being able to be with the guilt, that it helps you develop a deeper awareness of self, right? A deeper know. That's actually your intuition working. That's you learning to trust yourself. Now, why is trusting yourself important? Well, because you are an aspect of source. You're an aspect of source in action. So whatever you call the all that is, everybody has a different name for it. The all that is could be God, could be universe, could be whatever. I call most of the time I say the all that is, that you are an aspect of the all that is. And the all that is the part within us that is saying, hey, your soul has a deeper knowing, a deeper awareness, an inner divine understanding of why you are here, right? So when we learn to be with that emotional state, with whatever's showing up for us, we're actually inviting our soul, our connection to the all that is, to give insight as to what is in our best interest. But when we don't allow ourselves to sit with it, to be curious about it, to welcome it, then we don't actually get in touch with our truth.
We get in touch with everyone else's truth. And if you're anything like me and you avoided connecting with your body for years and years and years and years, you might have a pattern of calling all your friends and getting their opinion on what they think you should do about whatever. So if you find yourself in that pattern of like, I'm just going to ask other people their opinion, no, it's you're avoiding yourself.
Mhm.
And it takes some practice. I don't want to sit over here and give the perception that Isela and I got this all down and together all the time. It takes practice. If anything, I'm continuing to practice this. And I still have coping mechanisms that I go to avoid myself. But the more you practice, the more you'll trust yourself. Like it took some time to get to the place where, like, oh, I literally have a knowing. And if I listen to it, I will hear the knowing. It's also takes some practice at trusting that knowing too.
Okay.
So just know that it takes, I don't want to say it takes time, right? Let's not put a limitation on it, but it's a journey of some sort.
It's a moment by moment journey. And I want to just mention the trusting self. So if you are an aspect of of source, of the all that is, okay, when you are mistrusting of yourself, and this is what we call the little s or persona, right? You are also mistrusting of the big S, which is our self that's connected to source, our self that we are source in action. So that part of our soul, we are mistrusting of as well because, we are source in action and learning to trust yourself. Now, granted, we have a lot of stories. We have a lot of beliefs. We had a lot of experiences that sometimes get in the way of us being able to really intuitively hear the messages. We have a filter. And so part of our sacred journey is to release the filter, to let go of the ideas, the beliefs, the limiting beliefs, the perceptions of the world is a scary, horrible place to be in, right? That we can start to connect with our deepest sense of self, it becomes easier for us to tap into our intuitive nature. And so it is a sacred journey, or at least I call it a sacred journey. It is a journey, it's a moment by moment journey. And trusting comes in little tiny steps as we learn to access our inner wisdom.
Yeah, and it could be so scary too because we've been conditioned to think that the mind is the powerful source, right? The mind is all the power. And to hear someone say, oh, let's actually tap into the wisdom of the body and let's honor that. It is a new experience of life. And it to me, it's very liberating to take a moment and say, no, my body has some wisdom here. And it's a little outside of the box, obviously, in today's society. But when you start to connect to the body and you start to create safety in the body on that sacred journey, it is the most loving thing you could do for yourself.
Mm. And it's not that we don't experience trials and tribulations. I think that's one of the misconceptions when you learn to connect to whatever's showing up for you and connecting to your body. It's not that you don't feel frustration and anger and irritation and anxiety and all of the things. It's that you learn to actually ride the waves of those experiences with grace and with ease, as opposed to beating yourself up for why am I letting this overtake my sense of self right now. You don't beat yourself up anymore. You just go, oh yeah, I'm having a challenging experience right now.
Yeah. And instead of feeling like a victim to your feelings and emotions, you will just text your friend when they ask you how you're doing. And you just say, I'm riding a wave right now.
Shameful thing. Thing. Give yourself permission to feel.
Permission to feel granted. So if you like this conversation, if something about this conversation's drawn you in, we have a really fun invitation for you today. We have a spiritual community where we focus on spirituality and trauma healing combined. And we want to invite you to join us. In May, our topic of the month is manifestation. You can't do manifestation without feelings and emotions. So come join us in May for aligned manifestation. And you can join at the link in the description box below.
Thank you all for being with us.
Thank you. See you next time. Bye.